on this computer.
Hi, Anne. Thanks for taking the time to chat. My name's Shahnaz, and I'll be writing this up as an article for Two Drops of Ink literary blog. And so what I'm hoping to do today is to talk to you a little bit about all the amazing things you're doing, including the recent book you published called Free to Feel. But also, I really want to talk about everything that happens around that, because I know that the book is only a drop in the ocean of all the creative things that you're working on.
Cool. Glad to be here.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Very excited to be doing this. So maybe just to kick things off a little bit, can you tell me a little bit about the book Free to Feel and how it came about?
Yeah, Free to Feel wasn't the book that I was meant to write, or it wasn't the book that I planned to write. It was the book that was meant to come through. And I started in May of 2017. The book runs from May of 2017 to May of 2018. And it started with a message that I got from water, which is what you see in the We Are Water video. I felt these strong words in my body, and to the point where I was shaking. I was like almost dry heaving. I was sobbing. I was drooling. I was snotting. And I just heard these words and I just started to write. And when I looked up, it was this full, complete writing with a message from the water. And from then on, that was in May 2017, from then on I started to get similar messages. And they usually came in phrases. So you'll see it in the book, like in the We Are Water poem, it's something like, we are of the same drop, a multitude of droplets that make the whole. Or in We Are Woman, all you are is all the world needs. Or a witch is a woman who has realized her full potential. Or
I love that one.
These small little sentences that would come to me, and sometimes that was all that they were, right? Like a witch is a woman who has realized her full potential actually came in a dream state. So I typed something in my phone, and when I woke up, I remembered typing something, but I didn't remember what it was, and that's what I typed. So I wrote it in a dream state. And so something like, all you are is all the world needs, I wrote because I was writing for a friend who was getting married, and they had asked me to do a piece for just a women's gathering to bless her and help her in her new marriage in Costa Rica. And so I took those words and really thought about what that meant, thought about her as a human. And then out came more words and more emotions and more feelings. And so I tried not to edit myself in my way of processing different emotions: anger, rage, joy, happiness, regret, jealousy, anything that came to me, to tap into those emotions and just write from those places that wanted to be expressed. And when they felt done is when I would stop writing. And so Free to Feel is actually those raw and lightly edited, if anything, expressions. I don't even really like to call them poetry, because they just feel like channelings from somewhere deep inside, from emotions themselves. And yeah, that's how it came about. And then I started to gather them together for myself, because I wanted to see how I was growing and what was happening for me. And the words came to me again and said, this is a book that you're going to share. And it's actually more than a book, but just get the book out and you'll get the next coordinates of what you're meant to do with these things, which I'll talk to you more about. But that's how Free to Feel happened.
And can you maybe say a few words, because so Free to Feel is your first book, but there are a couple of really amazing projects that you did before that, right? So can you say maybe a little bit about Ashes and Tap-In Project, because those were sort of almost like warm-ups to bring you here.
Yeah. So July 4th, 2011, my dad died suddenly from a heart attack. And it took me on this path that would be this emotional digging for myself of, what does it feel like to go through grief? What does it feel like to lean into the emotions that come with grief, and to do it visually, to do it creatively, and not just reading books that are the 5 stages of grief or things that kind of give you this structure. I needed to see something visually and kinesthetically, because that's how I am. So the Ashes Project was my way of showing visually what grief looked like for me. And so the ashesproject.com is a photographer who was with me during 5 different times of deep grief work. So one is in the shower when I was working with just heavy sorrow and despair, and doing a practice called keening, which is weeping and shouting, which people do in different religions when on some, like in Arabic cultures, they'll do it on the body. So they'll actually be next to the body and weep and keen. And we did anger, we did loneliness in the middle of New York, just feeling like with all these people, just still this ache and this loneliness for this place in my heart that felt gone when he died. And that evolved to, when people looked at the site, they had this reaction that was really interesting and led me to tap in. Was, it's powerful and it's courageous, but I feel like I shouldn't be looking at it. Like, they had moments where they wanted to cover their eyes, and it was really in their face, and they felt like it's in my face, because it's like, this is your grief process. This is your grief, and I feel that I'm not privy to that. And so my question that led me to my hypothesis was, why is that? Why do we think that emotions in their full-fledged times when they come, we can't share them with others? We can't tell people at work that we're grieving, or that we're frustrated, or that we're angry, that we're sad. Is in the workplace, or even in our personal relationships, we're not allowed that ability to really to feel. Someone asks you, how are you? And you say, okay, fine, good. And you could be crumbling inside. You could be on the verge of, like, you could be having suicidal thoughts, you know? You could be in rage, and you'll still say, okay, I'm fine, you know, because of time or whatever. But I just wanted to stop that. I just was like, fuck that, because I was in such a grieving time that I actually didn't have another option. So I started Tap In, which came from the Ashes Project, was TAP, Tap In. And it was just a placeholder. The name was a placeholder. Tap into the power of your emotions. And it became a movement in New York, where we met with just humans and just talked about, what is fear? What is happiness? What is anger? And then we started to create from those places, and we video recorded a lot of them, that is on the tapin.org. And then we brought it into the public. So we would do large-scale installations on the street or in different locations. It would ask people to share, what is your biggest fear? Or what is happiness to you, really? You know, where is anger live in your body? So people could have that experience of almost like a Sleep No More for the human experience. That's what I wanted. I wanted people to, Sleep No More is great, and I loved it, but I didn't feel like I could actually work through something that I was going through, and I wanted to create those experiences for others. And so we did, over 10 to 15 workshops and experiences in New York. And then I really put that aside. I moved to California. I went within, and I just kind of hibernated with my art and what was evolving. And that's when I started to get the words, and Free to Feel happened. And so now, how does that look externally? Sharing something really vulnerable is something that I just do. I mean, I joke with people about, I'll never have like a normal job, because when you search Ann Koller, like the third image that comes up is me in the shower crying. So I'm not going to have a normal corporate job. It's anymore. That's not in the cards for me. And how can I create spaces and places and experiences for people to be free to feel? And that is my charge on this lifetime, and that is my purpose, and that is what I will dedicate every moment of my life to, whether it's talking to someone in an Uber, whether it's meeting a stranger, whether it's going deeper with a close friend and really seeing how are you feeling really? Tell me how you're really feeling, and let me support that, because that's what I want to support, because I think from our emotions comes our greatest masterpieces.
And have you, the book is, you call them expressions, but most other people would probably refer to them as poems or poetry. Had you written poetry before? Did you used to write a lot? Or, you said that you were a very visual person. So how did you bridge from being so visual to being also a wordsmith?
I don't know. It's a question I'm exploring now because I'm actually going like into my ancestral roots and going back to Ireland, going to Ireland in August because I just get words in my head. And when I wrote a poem recently about that, is what I realized is even as a child, I see patterns and numbers and I get words. And when I learned my my second language, which was Japanese, and then my third language, which is Portuguese, and then my fourth language, which is Spanish, I realized that the way that I was learning was that I would spell out the word in its form in my head and let it float in space. So casa in Portuguese wasn't translated to house. Casa was casa. And I would see C-A-S-A in my head. And so I think it's always been there. I've written articles for different publications, and I'm not quite sure how I translated it. I think it was due to a deep listening and really claiming my creative modality. I think we all have them, whether it's cooking or dancing or making love or painting, that we all have this way of expressing that we can that we're meant to bring to the world, and mine just happened to be words.
Well, they're pretty incredible words. I having read your book, I thought, I mean, as always, some of the content resonated more with me than other parts, but there were quite a few sections where I found myself either sort of laughing out loud or going, yes, oh my God, yes. And so it was amazing to me because it was almost like you were giving words to thoughts or feelings that I had never formulated before. So it was pretty incredible. And I really appreciated how the book has more than one part, right? There's the main part and then there's sort of that second part. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit? Because that's also part of, I think, how brave you were and how vulnerable in sharing both of those segments.
Yeah. When I was putting the poems together, I was trying to find ways to categorize the poems. And so we originally it was by season, and then the poems were in order with a date on top. So it was almost like a journal entry. Mm-hmm. And what we realized with the design, and then I got the download of what the cover was, and I actually made the cover with my own hands. There's a video on my site that talks about how that came through. And we realized that seasons didn't show up at all in the book. I didn't talk about them, and it was very disconnected. And then we thought, well, should we separate the chapters by emotions? And that didn't feel quite right either, because some of the poems have multiple emotions. Some of them, I didn't want it to be leading and to make the reader say like, well, this isn't anger. I didn't want to tell them how what they might feel. And so we landed on elements, which felt really, really resonant. And it went naturally with the colors and the order of the image on the cover, having fire being first, really this like place where you feel like you want to express something and you're not being allowed to. So it's like that anger, that anxiety, that passion, that build up, the place before what I call the water boiling. And then the water is about grief and sadness and curiosity and grace and like beauty and really coming to terms with, wow, I've been hiding my greatest masterpiece inside of me, and allowing yourself to grieve that. And Earth is about getting your feet back on the ground and being like, who am I? And what is this life about? And what do I want to express? It's more of like the chapter with identity. And then Air is this like dreamy, hopeful fantasy place, the place between here and now, the in-between, between where you are and where you want to go. And then the last chapter, which actually some people recently I found out that don't even realize is there, and it was meant to be a secret, it's a separate book in it of itself. I could have stopped at, I think it would have been, it's 150 pages right now, maybe a little more, but I could have stopped at a 100-page book and probably, cut down on a lot of printing. But the story behind the words is about 45 pages, and that is meant to give the reader a connection to what I was going through. So in the back, you'll see the name of a poem, like Love is Who You Are, and it'll say the date that I wrote it. It'll say where I was in the world, and then it'll give a paragraph about what I was going through. So the reader has a chance to, if they want to read the quote unquote poems and just let it sink in and be inspired by it and do their own writings, that's cool. If they're like, wow, what was she going through? They can look in the back and say, okay, she was working with her mom as her mom was coming off of antidepressants. And this is what she wrote for her mom. So they have a connection to a human experience, because I wanted the words to live and breathe. I didn't want to write a poetry book. And I have a hard time calling it a poetry book, because a lot of people will say, I don't like poetry, or I don't read poetry, but I love your book. So I was very careful with the editor, with Becky, that I worked with on the description around what it was, because I didn't want it's not a book of poems. It's a book of emotional expressions of the human journey.
That makes a lot of sense, and puts it into even sort of a even brighter light, if that makes sense. And so what are you doing about now? Because traditionally, now, of course, your whole process is far from traditional, but traditionally you write a book, you edit it, you publish it, and then you go on a book tour. So what is your take now on the sort of the post-publication? Because you mentioned that the book is almost not the point of publishing the book, right? There's more. So what is that more that you're working on?
So the words were really strong in my head of just get the book out and you'll understand what your next step is. Because I had completed a job in last April and needed to find other work, or what am I going to do? What is my purpose? And I just kept that to my heart. Just get the book out and the rest you'll understand. And I went through different designers for the layout and editing and things like that. And when it came out, and I could feel it in my hands, it felt exactly how I thought it would. I visualized how it felt in my hands. And when I thought about taking it on tour, and I thought about like people sitting in rows in a bookstore, or in like some room with bright lighting, just listening to the poems, and I'd read the poems and they'd clap, and then maybe they'd come up after and get it signed and buy a copy. Everything in my body was like, fuck that. Like, fuck that. That's not the purpose of the book. This book is for you. This book is for you to read and be inspired to create for yourself. Even if you hate the poetry, or even if you don't resonate with certain things, it's meant for you to realize that creating from emotions is the key to unlocking your creative genius. And so what I'm doing now is I'm taking it once a month. I'm doing an experience, either a workshop that is more intimate, like a writer's workshop that I did in Austin, or just like some like little poetry readings, where people read poems or read some of their own, and then a larger art experience, kind of like the tap-in experiences, that involve poetry from the book, and then music. We actually made 5 songs with the words from the poetry, beautiful music. I'm creating an album. And then they dance to the music, and then they create art from the movement and the emotion. So we're doing that. We did one here as a test in California, in the Bay Area, and then we're doing our first one in New York, May 10th, and then we're looking to do one in LA in June, and some other places around the country, and maybe globe if it goes well. But really, having people that was always how it was with Tap In. It was just we're gonna be vulnerable and show you what we're scared of, and then in order for you to have permission and feel safe enough to express, and that's what it's always been about for me. It hasn't been about, oh, Anne's this great like poet and writer. It's just I want to spark something in others. One of his name is Arnaud, and he has something called Stand Up for Passion, where I did a talk for him, 7-minute talk. And what he said about my work and my talks is that Anne leaves no one indifferent. And that's how I want to live. When people are around me, I want them to feel safe to feel. I want them to, if they feel agitated, to feel agitated. You know, if they're annoyed at me, to feel annoyed at me. If they are feeling such love and care for me, to feel that, but to feel fully. Or to not talk to me at all. But I prefer if they talk to me. But yeah, I don't want to leave this world indifferent. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're definitely on the right path for that with all these experiences. So if somebody wants to know more about these experiences and wants to participate, do they need an invitation? Can they just find information on your website, or how are you recruiting people to be part of those different monthly experiences? Or if somebody has an idea for you, like how does that all work?
Yeah, you can go to Anne Koller, ANNEKOLLER.com, or you can contact me, Anne, ANNE, at thetapin.org. And just write me, just say, hey, I want to do this in my city. Because I'm really collaborating with the different people. It's not just, oh, this is the structure. It's kind of like, well, what's alive for you? So in Austin, my friend does, works with writers. And so we did a writer's workshop with yoga and writing, and really focusing on getting out of the writer's block. It's going to be a little bit different in Berkeley at the end of the month, which is about softening the heart, about like softening these hard edges that we get. And then using yoga and art for that. And then for New York, I'm opening this Parade for Love that my friend's been running for 5 years. The night before, we're doing a Free to Feel. And we're focusing on love through the elements. So the poetry that will be read there is like love in fire, love in water, love in earth, love in air. So it's modular. And and just reach out to me if you want to do those, a writer's workshop. If you want to do the full art experience, I'll come to your city, and collaborate with you on it. So it's really just deeper collaborations with people, and bringing their work to life. And just the fact of doing it together, they're going to get a Free to Feel experience for themselves, and they're going to go through the curriculum just in working together, to express.
And so there's something I want to come back to, because you mentioned, speaking of being involved and going through the whole process. Of course, anybody who writes a book or any kind of content is, of course, very close to the content and very close to the whole process. But you said that you actually made the cover yourself. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about how that happened. And then also, how did you find the right editor? How did you find the right designer? Because you self-published, right? So if you could also, and I'll come back to that, but I'd also love to hear about why self-publish versus trying to, pitch to a publishing house or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think when you bring on a publisher, it's usually more in a more initial phase. So you send a proposal of what you want your book to be about, and you write the first chapter. In my case, the book was already written, and then I realized that it was a book, right? So if I would have brought it to a publisher, it wouldn't feel as in line with my own integrity, because you work with a publisher to produce the book, to write the book, to get their feedback. Like, what does the audience want? I remember early on, you asked me, who is your audience? And I was like, me. Like, I wrote this for my own healing. And so they kind of work with you on that. So it made more sense for me to self-publish. Maybe in the second one, it might be different. And then I was going to hire someone to do the cover for me. And I work with a lot of great designers. I always have. I surround myself with like amazing designers and writers. So like logo, video people. I mean, so my videos are always really good. And my logos are great because of them. And what came up for me was, you're going to do the cover. And because I could see kind of the image, of fingers through water. And then I started to play with it. And so I made that image on the cover. I had a designer do the layout. the layout of the book. I actually had like one designer, and then I had another one, and then a third one helped me get across the finish line. So I had like 3 layout designers. I think that's really important to get. Is like the book and like the fonts. I mean, the fonts took forever, and like the page numbers, and like you don't know what it looks like until you print it. And then the copywriter, I worked with a friend who had done copywriting for me with Tap In, who knew me, who knew my journey with my dad, who knew my journey with emotions, who I really respect as a writer individually. And also she has a way with words, specifically my words. And she wrote the back cover and the Amazon description. Because that was just something I felt like I couldn't do. Sometimes you can't talk about your own book. And she was able to read through the book twice. And I mean, she sent me the back cover description and not one word has changed. So she nailed it from the first thing that she wrote. Yeah, so just having the right team. And yeah, I'm working on helping others with that process, specifically the process of structuring the order of the writings, or what could the chapters be, reading through and really getting into the content and helping writers figure out how they section things off, because that historically is what takes you the longest. Is like you can have everything written but no chapters, and it could take you another year to actually separate out the chapters and what is the story arc. So which is a whole nother thing. And then if you don't have the title, that can take another processing. So I'm helping writers right now do that, and developed a 6-week intensive that mixes both one-on-ones and like editing, where I'm helping them decipher the content that they currently have and see if there's anything else that they need. If there's gaps in the writings, that like specific poems or specific writings themselves, and then overall, like, you might want to write 10 more things or something like that. So yeah, I'm offering that as well if you're a writer and need help.
Nice, exciting. So you just hinted at the fact that maybe for the second book you would not self-publish. So what is this second book? Are you already drumming something else up?
Oh, I have 4 books, like,
oh wow,
already being written. I'm in this creative flow, and I'm just letting it happen. Yeah, I think the easy thing would be to self-publish, but it would be nice to maybe reach out to a publisher and see what they think. Because what I'm thinking of focusing on is specifically different emotions and different experiences that are often taboo. When I started Tap In, I was like, one of the taglines we were playing with was from taboo to talked about. And I wanted emotions to be like how we talk about the Kardashians, or how we talk about, how we talk about gossip. Is like, for me, the juiciest thing to talk to someone is about is emotions. And breaking some of those down, like things around grief, things around suicide, things around losing children, death, and these things that don't feel good, that we all go through, like loss and ecstasy and pleasure and getting in touch with ourselves and our bodies. And so a lot of my poems are coming out of situations. Getting fired, I have a poem about that. So we're getting let go, sooner than I thought. Yeah, and also water. Water was a book that I wanted to write, and I have enough poems and enough material to actually just have a specific book on that I would probably call Follow the Water, just because of the adventures that I've taken, and what I've learned from the water.
Taking some notes to try and capture all of this. And so was there, it sounds like you didn't necessarily have all this plotted out, but you just were very open to letting things happen. But within that, were there any surprises, good or bad? Or unexpected aspects, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything was a surprise. one of the biggest surprises was like the actual font. Like I wanted people to be able to read the book, and we had it all uploaded, and we had the font picked, and then I printed out like just a rough version, and I saw people lean in and squint their eyes and like get frustrated, and I was like, oh hell no, I'm not doing this. I'm not putting it up. And then it took another 2 or 3 months, you know, because we had to go through everything. I was surprised by also the way that the words flow were, because I read them to someone. I had another editor that I read them to someone, and she helped place like indentations and different things, because I wanted the words to live like a spoken word. So the book is actually meant to be read out loud. The book is actually songs. It's songs and mantras. And so it's meant to like play with the cadence and see what you feel. I guess like also surprising of like how it does feel like laboring. You're laboring this child and the doubts that come up, and like who's going to read this, and does it even matter if one person reads it? Does it, you know, is it that important that thousands read it? And to just keep going back to that this is something I'm giving birth to, and people can think my baby's ugly, but I wrote it for myself.
You're trying to prevent that.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna pause my video because you're breaking up a little bit, and I don't know if it's my internet connection. Does that work?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Let's see if that's better. Okay. Okay, you still there? Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good, excellent. So what advice would you have to somebody who has a project in mind and is really excited to write a book, whether it's poetry, or expressions, or fiction, or anything else?
Just start putting it in just get a Google Doc and put it all in there, whatever you have, and just start culling and pulling up your assets and put them all in one place. Because that's when I started to do that, that's when I realized it was a book. Because sometimes you have all these scattered writings in journals or in your notes in your phone, and it doesn't feel connected. And I finally felt connected when I put them all in one place, a Word document, whatever you wish, and just start the process.
That's probably one of the main stumbling blocks, is that projects live in people's minds and they don't take the leap. So
yeah, and just say out loud, just try it on and say, I'm writing a book, or you know, I'm writing a book. My book's 80% done. You know, and not to put pressure on yourself, but to just gather them together and then read them yourself and see what themes come up, and allow yourself to keep writing.
That's some of those bits of advice seem obvious, but I think they're actually crucial. Like, just start and allow yourself to keep writing. They tend to be understated.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my list of questions to see if there's anything else that I want to.
Did you have specific questions about poems or something you had mentioned?
I have a lot of questions and comments about poems, but I'm that's what I'm looking at. I'm toying with whether or not, how to go down that rabbit hole, or whether to go down it, because I have to say that part of what I also loved about these poems was it was the fact that I read them and I could interpret them and resonate with them the way I wanted to. So in a way, I'm almost reticent to ask you too much about the poems, because I want that experience to still be available to anybody who reads your book. Yeah. I definitely have notes throughout, but maybe I'll email you with those and we can talk about it some other time. So I don't want any spoilers, you know.
There's no spoiler alerts with this book. It's just way too open for that. You read the first poem and it's spoiled for you.
That's true. We'll
just ask just one more question. Just whatever's on your mind. And if there's anything else, I can always email you.
Okay, so I was just like flipping through the book because I have a bunch of notes on different poems, and there was one where I've lost it again, but where I just jotted down imposter syndrome with a question mark. And so I know that this is something that a lot of people that are in the creative space, a lot of people in general, but especially in the creative space, feel. And so my question is that something that you've struggled with or come across? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a good one. I was talking about this yesterday with someone, is that we live in a comparative culture. And so you look at, like, one of my favorite writers is Brene Brown, who really cracked, like, exploded open this idea of vulnerability and creating from vulnerability, and that the greatest innovations and the greatest things that we can make come directly from our ability to be vulnerable. And I thought about, what would she think about my book? I'm actually going to send it to her. What would she think about it? You know, and I'll never sell as many as hers, or I'm not going to be this, like, I'm not going to be able to be her, you know? And so that, like, trying not to compare myself, and also taking inspiration from other writers and other poets. Also, like, not really wanting to write a poetry book, but it very much is in the poetry genre. And not comparing myself to a Rupi Kaur, who I adore her writings and who I got great inspiration from. And just letting the expression come out in what felt in line with me and my integrity. And that's why I'm doing the book tour my way. I don't heavily market my book. I've never done a Facebook ad for the book, or, you know, I don't have a publicist. I'm, like, looking for one potentially, because I just hate selling. And I just felt like if people want to find it, they're going to find it. And to just be in myself, because if things do pop off and I get famous and all these things, that I know that I did it my way. And I think that can curb some of that imposter syndrome, is if you can just do it your way, and then focus on scaling it and being your unique gift, then that's a lot more blissful than thinking, like, oh, well, you know, I don't have the marketing chops that Marie Forleo or Gabby Bernstein has. Like, maybe I'll never be in a yoga magazine, but maybe I will, and maybe I'll do it my way, because those people also did it their way, and they had imposter syndrome, you know. So it's essential for each of us to fully activate in our own expression. And yes, will it have residue of other people's impact on us? My friend who's a neuroscientist said that all of the imprints on our brain are not ours. Our brain is made up of the imprint of others and experiences and learnings. And so there's things that you're going to gain inspiration from, and ideas that might not be unique to you, that they might be out there. But if you write it from your heart and you express it from where you're at, it'll be a unique expression. Even if someone wrote a Frida Field book and their image looks similar to mine, and they separated it by elements and they did story behind the words. I mean, even after all that, there's no way that it would be the same. It would, you know, because it would be two different expressions.
That reminds me, this is really random, but I remember in high school we read this book of Luis Borges' short stories, and one of his short stories is about an author who sets out to rewrite Don Quixote word for word, and it's exactly what it's about what you're talking about now, because in this short story, this author somehow manages to go back and write the exact same story, you know, but it's completely impossible because there's no way. So it's an interesting literary theme, because I think it's very true that everything is ultimately, if you're honest about what you're writing, then it will be your interpretation, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, before we wrap up completely, is there anything that you were dying to share that I did not ask you about?
No, I'm interested in what poems that you were like really brought different things up in you, and I love hearing how people are reading the book. So I invite people who are watching this video or tell me how you're reading the book. You know, some people read it, they open to a poem and see what inspires them. That's what your friend who you introduced me to is doing. She just like opens the book and sees what lesson of the day. And I have another friend that reads a poem each morning. She's reading them in order. And then she times herself for 10 minutes and she allows herself to write, and she's writing music. And my mom reads the poem and then she reads behind the story behind the words, and then she goes back to the poem. So I'm really curious of how people are reading it.
Nice. Well, I basically sat down and read it cover to cover.
I know, you're the only one. I think you're the only one.
But you know, that's me being true to me. Like when I'm hungry, I tend to devour things. I can't help it. So yeah, I kind of read it cover to cover, in part because I was so excited to finally have it in my hands and get to see. And you know, I was a little hesitant first because I'm one of those people that you talked about at the very beginning. It's not that I don't read poetry, but it's that I don't gravitate towards reading poetry. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, Anne wrote this. Of course, I'm going to read it. What's it going to be like? You know, I mean, I had no idea what to expect. And I think I read the first poem, and then I'm not going to say I stopped breathing until I finished, because that's a pretty long, I mean, I'm a fast reader, but that's still a long time, but it sucked me in completely.
Awesome.
And then I picked up a pencil and started like making notes of things that I thought were amazingly well said and things that resonated and questions I had and all that. But that will be a conversation for another day.
Yay. When I come to Portugal.
Yes.
See you.
Exactly. When you come visit me and we're sitting here in the middle of nature, surrounded by animals that are distracting us, we will have that conversation. That sounds
amazing.
Wonderful.
Cool.
All right. Well, have a wonderful, I guess, afternoon for you.
Yes.
And if there are any other questions, I will definitely let you know. But I think this was already a great conversation. And thank you for all the insights on your writing process and how this book came to be.
Cool. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Good.
I'll send you the video.
Here, back.
Yay. Sending you love. Beijos.
Yes. Beijinhos.
Beijinhos.
Talk to you
Ciao.
soon. Bye.